Hello, welcome. Thank you all for joining me to learn how the new Fusion 360 simulation extension may help you to reduce product design cycle delays by simulating as you design. My name's Kristen Kilroy, and I'm a product marketing manager for simulation products here at Autodesk. I'm joined today with my colleague, Kenny Cornett, a technical marketing manager for simulation. Kenny will be monitoring questions as I present, and then will help me during the live Q&A session at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them within your the question section, and Kenny and I will be happy to answer them live. For those who maybe have questions following up after the webinar, or who might be watching the recording, please go ahead and post your questions to the Fusion 360 forums, where Kenny and I, as well as other simulation experts, will be happy to go ahead and answer those questions and help you out. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what we'll be reviewing today. So with the ultimate goal of trying to reduce product design delays, we'll start today with a brief overview of the simulation extension and how its capabilities. I'll then share some of the Fusion 360, how Fusion 360 enables the user to easily experiment with the various designs while achieving helpful simulation insights. We'll dig into the benefits of having simulation capabilities early in the design process. And lastly, I'll share how you can actually get started using the simulation extension if you're not already using it. Now, for those who are newer to the Fusion 360 platform, Fusion 360 is a cloud-based software platform that unifies access to CAD, CAM, CAE, and PCB capabilities. Its extensions, which I've listed here, have enabled users to take its capabilities to the next level through flexible subscription offerings and increased capabilities through the use of these extensions. Notice on the portfolio of the extensions listed each of the capabilities. You can begin to start seeing distinct segments where we are working to provide solutions for machining, AI solving, PLM, and simulation. This presentation obviously will stick to the simulation extension, which was only just released back in January. So it's still fairly new to the realm of the simulation or the Fusion 360 extensions. So let's see what it's all about and see what people are getting excited about using it. The study types available within the simulation extension can be split between structural, thermal, explicit, and injection molding manufacturability. You may have noticed that most of these have actually been available within Fusion 360 for several years, and there's maybe a few of them that are a little bit newer. These simulations utilize solvers that have already been validated and may already have been a part of some of your workflows today. As the platform has been developed within Fusion 360, there was the observation that designers needed a way to connect two key areas of product development: product design and product performance. With that gap showing more and more in traditional CAD software, the opportunity fell to Fusion 360 to build out this connected workflow through a platform for designers to have access to simulation. Learning how a product design is influenced by the real-world situation and environment it's intended to perform in, produces a huge opportunity for optimization, enhancement, and validation. This is where the Fusion 360 team found offering a subscription of these 8 simulation study types enables all kinds of product designers and engineers unrestricted access to whatever and however many simulations they need to design their ideal part. One thing that is still unique about the simulation extension when compared to those other extensions on the previous slide is the option to access the simulation capabilities through alternate methods, not just through the subscription to the extension. One option is a user can access a handful of simulation study types through a local solve option, as long as they have an active Fusion 360 subscription. They would just need to install solvers on their local machine to be able to access those. And again, these are limited to a few different study types, which we can go over a little bit later in the session. Alternately, Fusion 360 subscribers can utilize any study type through a pay-per-solve cloud token cost for individual simulation studies. But for the sake of time, we'll review how to access these extensions again at the end of the webinar, just to make you aware as we go through this, the next few slides here. So really, the simulation extension combines access to each of these simulation capabilities in order to offer designers and engineers what they need when they need it. Now that I've set the stage for what the Fusion 360 simulation extension is, let's take a look into why it makes sense to have simulation tied to your designs. If you're involved in any stage of the product design cycle, you're likely familiar with how iterative it can be. Designs being revised, finding new things popping up right before product launches, or even worst case, premature product failure after product launch, resulting in design rework. Each of those are more likely resulted in delays to the overall project timeline, and of course, increasing costs to manufacture. When you take a step back and incorporate simulation into the product design process early on, the chances of running into these lessen because of the time and resources invested in them are lower. Usually there is a very small window to make these changes without impacting the project timeline or costs. I know when I was working as a project engineer, I would actually have, if I was lucky, maybe a couple days to run a design past each stakeholder before things had to move on to the next stage. Those couple days, however, would actually be the first time slots sacrificed when going through to the project scope at the beginning of the project in order to save time to market. This varies from project to project, obviously, but almost always happens during this design and engineering phase where time is critical. Now, simulating the real-world conditions lets designers or engineers gain insights into how their product will perform before they need to invest time and money into building physical prototypes or different types of testing options. Now, as I mentioned, I did go through and mention design iterations as being one of the reasons for possible delays. And there is a function within the simulation workspace that actually allows for geometry simplification. This lets the user both simplify the CAD model to remove features that don't impact simulation, in turn minimizing the solver time. And it also provides a place to sort of draft up different design changes. Any changes made to the geometry using this function do not reflect in the actual CAD model, so it's untouched within your design workspace, making it that draft state that I mentioned. This is what I've done here with these two beams on the screen. You can see I removed the holes in the beam on the right versus the beam on the left. The simulation study alarms the user of any geometry changes made, even within that simplification space. And it basically says these results are outdated, you must rerun in order to get more accurate results. In this case, we're comparing two different designs So we want that one to be outdated in order to analyze what those two holes are actually doing to the results. Now, why is this beneficial for product designers? It might seem obvious, but if not, we'll go ahead and dig into that question a little bit. So the ability to perform design simulations lets the product designer easily check the feasibility of design alterations without having to either leave the CAD program for a different simulation software or send it to someone else to perform the simulation if they're available. He or she is able to run simulations as they continue to iterate on those designs, minimizing the delays that could come later on to test various iterations. They can then share the results directly with stakeholders to justify why they should or should not make a change. So let's take a look at this example here. This is a flashlight that Kenny actually had created. And let's say we're the ones engineering the design of this product. Let's go ahead and assume the bulbs here do emit some amount of heat, and the housing is made of plastic. When we finalize the assembly design, we can run through a quick thermal steady state analysis, which is shown here on the screen, on the materials assigned, and the heat sources are specified in order to show that heat source there. Now, this allows us to evaluate the safety and integrity of that part individually. Next, knowing the material supply industry has been impacted heavily from recent events by supply chain issues, we can then evaluate alternate materials for that thermal performance. We can then take it one step further and actually run a plastic injection molding simulation on the component using the primary material and then compare it to those alternate materials. If there is a need to make that change to any of those alternate materials, you'll be able to understand what the impact on the part quality and manufacturing process could be based on the results of that simulation. So on the screen here just shows, again, the thermal state simulation as well as the study material selection of the plastic injection molding simulation. And I wanted to point that out because if you could see at the top, all results, over 12,000 materials are loaded within the Fusion 360 material library there. So many materials to choose from. Again, ideal for that alternate material selection in cases like many people are running into today. Now, this whole workflow is made possible for one person to run all at once. So someone can have the thermal state running and then in tandem do the plastic injection molding running at the same time in the cloud. And they have access to both of those simulations. Theoretically, they could use any of those options that I mentioned to access it before. However, ideally, having that subscription to the simulation extension within Fusion 360 enables them to not have to worry about restricting how many runs they go through for cloud tokens or maybe the local solve limits. Now, by doing this, we're able to skip the step of sending it to a different analyst in order to do just a quick simulation before finalizing that part or product design. Although more extensive simulation may be planned, we all have a fail-safe. We have ultimately at this time a fail-safe product design for initial simulation so we can change. So the actual change requests that may come in after sending it for additional simulation that's already planned would be minimal. Now, we're also reassured that the design will be able to handle unexpected material shortages and those thermal stress or steady state characteristics. The injection molding simulation also validated that parts should be moldable as it is currently designed, which reduces the risk of delay from mold troubleshooting or even tool rework that may not have been caught earlier. Now, I didn't show any of the screenshots of the mold flow, or the injection molding workflow, due to Kenny actually going in depth on the injection molding simulation this Thursday. So keep an eye out, look for that webinar. We'll be sure to share that with you when we wrap this webinar up. But I just wanted to mention that as why I'm glazing over it a little bit there. But this gives you a rough idea of how you can apply utilizing multiple simulation study types to a single product design cycle. Looking at the specifics of how this extension can prove beneficial to the product design cycle, we can already see from the last couple slides that the flexibility of subscribing to the extension enhances the product designer or engineer's insights into manufacturability and performance. The wide range of simulation capabilities lets them explore more options in less time than traditional prototyping. These simulations are trusted and proven simulation software from Autodesk's simulation product portfolio as a backbone to its solvers. So you can trust the accuracy of the simulation as well. Now, being from a simulation background for the past 8 years, one of my favorite tips for simulation is that you get out of it what you put into it. Simulation is only as accurate as the information you're inputting. But although each of these simulations do begin fairly straightforward, they have default values for loads or materials and so forth. And you can go ahead and run most of them with just a couple clicks. But you also have the ability to customize the inputs to fit your needs, to improve that accuracy over time as more information becomes available. Next, the flexibility, as I mentioned, that you have access within the extension to vary. It varies so that you can access simulations as you see fit. If you're running several simulations a month, you may want to really consider that subscription option. While if you aren't quite sure if certain projects might need it, maybe temporarily use that pay-per-use type model, pay-per-solve type model, until you have a better idea for what you'd like to explore with simulation. It's always about asking that question, what do you want to get out from the simulation? Do you just need a quick design advice type of simulation run? Or do you need more in-depth understanding why something's bending a certain way or failing a certain way? And lastly, you can really dig into the data behind your whole product design through the use of the Fusion 360 platform. Simplify your simulation experience using a single software at the center of each of the design stages, whether it be CAD modeling, simulation, PCB design, manufacturing, or even rendering. No need to export to third-party software to gain insightful data points on product performance. This is often a roadblock for other simulation software, hence why the Fusion platform is so flexible and really goes with the user at that point. To wrap up today's webinar, before we go into answering some of your questions, I wanted to share how you can actually get started with the Fusion 360 simulation extension if you haven't already. You can go to the Fusion 360 website on Autodesk's webpage and select the extensions section, where you can find the simulation and the other extensions that I listed earlier. I've also listed a link there that you can certainly copy in and type in your URL. We do offer free trials of extensions, and with this, you can access the capabilities of the extension to see if this really fits your business's needs. And you can do so through the website. If subscribed to Fusion 360, As I mentioned earlier, you already do have access to that local solve option for some of the studies. It's very limited with the number of studies, and it includes static stress, modal frequencies, thermal steady state, and thermal stress. And it is restricted with the amount of solves that you can do at a time. So look into it before you do rely on that, because you might need additional solver capabilities. The next option is the pay per solve, as I mentioned, using the cloud tokens and your existing Fusion 360 subscription. The token costs do vary depending on the study type, so keep that in mind as you do look at this option. And finally, the two newer offering options is the subscription to the extension, either monthly or annually. Again, this is where you would gain that unlimited cloud solve access to any of those 8 simulation types while subscribed. If you're not sure or have more questions about how this may fit your needs, contact your Autodesk reseller or partner, or you could just reach out through the website. We have a contact form that we can get one of our sales team members to contact you to discuss it further. We're happy to work with you on one-on-one in order to find what works best for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope this webinar really provided you with some good high-level insight into the Fusion 360 simulation extension. And I thank you all for attendance. So now I'll go ahead and open it up the floor to answer any questions that came in. Hey, Kenny, anything pop up on the radar?
Not so far. I did have a question for you, though. Is it possible to add like custom materials to the mechanical solve types? I know that the plastics are managed elsewhere in the cloud database, but for mechanical solves, can I change my materials?
That's a great question. I feel like there could be a way to do it. I'm just not as familiar with the mechanical side of things on the material end. But that's certainly something that we can follow up on and provide an answer through the forums, maybe just to broadcast it to everyone here attending. The material database within the plastic injection molding section of Fusion 360, that's backbone was the material database within the mold flow simulation software of Autodesk. And with that, we transferred the majority of those materials over, hence why it was so vast, the 12,000 plus materials. On the mechanical side of things, I think the developers are still working a way to really intertwine those two material databases. So that's why it might be slightly different if you're looking at them, but it's a great question. All right, and I don't see any other questions popping up there. Oh, one quick question. Is this going to be public anywhere? Yes, great question. So this webinar will be available, the recording of it. We will send out it within the follow-up email if you register for it. And then we will also be posting it on our website. Okay, and I think that's it. Just a quick reminder, we do have, like I mentioned, Kenny will be presenting a little bit more technical on the plastic injection molding simulation of the simulation extension. That will be Thursday at the same time. So if you didn't see that invite pop up, we'll try to include that in our follow-up email. And we wish you all the best and have a great rest of your day.